Let's get out our supplies. You're going to need your hand sewing needle, your thread, a pair of scissors, your felt square that has the button sewn in the middle, a ruler, a pen or marker, and a sheet of printer paper or notebook paper. Get your thread and pull about an arm's length before you cut it. You want to make sure it's long enough to sew with so you won't run out. For this stitch, you want to keep your thread single thickness, meaning you're not going to tie the two ends together. You're only going to tie a knot on one end, and you're going to keep that little loose dangly piece there. So today you are going to be learning the last hand stitch, which is a blanket stitch. You see them on the edges of the blankets that people like to buy at Old Navy. I know I probably have like a couple around my house. And it's also a stitch that's really good when sewing together fabric that doesn't fray. So when it comes to our felt projects, the blanket stitch is just the perfect stitch to hold everything together so the stuffing doesn't come out. So this stitch is a little bit trickier. So we're definitely going to practice on paper first, and then we'll move to the felt. All right, let's practice. You're going to take your piece of paper, fold it hamburger style, and then you're going to draw on your dots the same way we've done it for all of our previous stitches. For this stitch, it's typically to sew two pieces of fabric together. So the first thing we want to do is hide our knot. So we are actually going to sew from the middle of our two pieces of fabric. So think of it like a sandwich. The outsides are the bread, and we want to be in the center of the sandwich. We're always going to be stitching from the front. So you're going to go in your first hole that you drew, and you basically want to stitch through the spot that you initially hid your knot. So right through to the back. And now you're always going to come over and through the front dot. So there are two different ways to do this stitch. One is you pull your thread and you'll get to the point where you have a little tiny loop. You're going to take your needle from the right to the left through the loop and pull. And what you're kind of doing is sewing little letter T's across the top of your fabric. It holds the stuffing in when you go to make like a plush. So here you go, front to back. Pull, wait until you have that little loop. Put the needle in from the right to the left. And okay, so here's the way I like to do this stitch. So you put your needle in from the front to the back. You're going to take the thread, you see where my left hand is, and put it behind the needle and pull. So watch it a couple of times. I come in through the front to the back, my needle's still in there. I take the thread and put it behind the needle and I pull up. And every time I do that, it's kind of making like a chain link from stitch to stitch. So I take thread, put it behind the needle, pull. Front to back, take the thread, behind the needle, pull. And your goal is to keep your stitches the same distance from the edge of the fabric as they are apart. So you don't want to make like really big stitches because when you go to stuff whatever it is that you're making, the stuffing will just end up falling right out. So front to back, wrap the needle with the thread and pull. So you're going to go the length of your paper for practice. So now it's time to tie the knot. You are going to go to the back side of your fabric, and you're going to take your needle and poke through the last stitch that you did. But you don't want to poke it all the way through both pieces of fabric. You only want to poke it through that back side of fabric. And you're going to come up like you're the cheese and the bread. So you're in between the two pieces of fabric. I take my thread and I pull up. So there's the first step of making the knot. Now I'm not poking anywhere. I'm going in between the two pieces of fabric. And I went in between my last two stitches, and then I'm wrapping the thread around my needle and pulling, and it'll tie a knot. And if you want, you can actually do that twice to tie like a really strong knot. And then you would just snip it and you're done. All right, time for the real deal. So you're going to grab your felt square. You're going to go on the edge that you haven't sewn on yet. And you're going to fold it in half so it lines up with your back stitch side. And I like to take a marker. I do my dots so my stitches can be pretty equal from the edge and equal from each other. And I will go down that entire side of the felt square. You're going to get your needle and thread, open it up like a sandwich, and you're going to go from the middle to the back side. So now your knot is going to be hidden in between the two layers of felt. Now when you go to sew, the first stitch, you always go through the same hole. So over to the front, I go from the front to the back through the same spot that I previously sewed through. And then I pull. So following the same pattern, you're going to go through the front. I wrap my thread around and pull. Through my front dot, I wrap the thread around the back and pull. And you're going to keep doing that. So if you forget to wrap the thread around, sometimes you can still find the loop to fix it, but you want all of those stitches to be linked. Through the front, wrap the thread, pull. Through the front, wrap the thread, pull. And you're going to keep doing that the entire length of your felt square. So now it's time to tie the knot. You are going to go to the back side of your fabric, and you're going to take your needle and poke through the last stitch that you did. But you don't want to poke it all the way through both pieces of fabric. You only want to poke it through that back side of fabric. And you're going to come up like you're the cheese and the bread. So you're in between the two pieces of fabric. I take my thread and I pull up. So there's the first step of making the knot. Now I'm not poking anywhere. I'm going in between the two pieces of fabric. And I went in between my last two stitches, and then I'm wrapping the thread around my needle and pulling, and it'll tie a knot. And if you want, you can actually do that twice to tie like a really strong knot, and then you would just snip it and you're done.